Good morning and welcome North Shore Unitarian Universalists, gathered from 6 congregations, the First Church in Salem, the Religious Society of Newburyport, First Universalist Church of Essex, North Shore Unitarian Universalist Church in Danvers, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greater Lynn, and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Marblehead. Together, right now, we are 128 strong and counting. I'm sure that number will continue to grow. I want to take just a moment to express our collective gratitude for all the people who helped create this service this morning and the technology that makes it possible for us to gather around an enormous harvest table of beauty and blessing. May we find the strength as one body to face these challenging times. As we prepare to gather around holiday tables with family and friends in gratitude for all that we have, we acknowledge that the land that we inhabit was not freely given. This is the ancestral homeland of the Pawtucket, the Pennacook Abenaki, the Massachusetts, and the Namkeg people. The traditional territory upon which we live, work, and worship is not bound by state boundaries alone, but by the ancestral heritage of First Nations peoples. We are bound by the past that uprooted their people like trees from the land, 7 generations blown about and scattered. I invite you now to take a moment to take a deep breath for all that we have been and all that we hope to become, to arrive in this moment, in this place, with these people. Bring all that you are, your beliefs and traditions, your identity, your story, and your wisdom to this gathered body. Companions on the journey all. Welcome, friends.
We gather this morning, a congregation of congregations, individuals connected by belief, community, faith, and life. We gather this morning with the current events on our mind: booster shots for all adults, the Rittenhouse verdict, infrastructure legislation passed, and more. The world is busy around us in ways that lift our spirits and in ways that bring them down. We gather this morning, the day after the Transgender Day of Remembrance, grieving the loss of the 40 transgender or gender nonconforming people killed so far in 2021 just for being who they are. We gather this morning with a holiday approaching on Sunday, some of us anticipating joyful connection, some of us anticipating sadness and strife, some of us anticipating loneliness, some of us anticipating all three. We gather this morning with all that we bring to the table, the blessings of the past week, the past month, the past year, both large and small. We also bring the difficulties of our lives in the many forms and shapes those take. We bring our anxiety, our tears, our fear, our shame, and our exhaustion. We bring our joy, our happiness, our groundedness, our laughter, and our gratitude. We gather, bringing our full selves to the table. We enter now into sacred space, Space made sacred, even in this virtual form, by our coming together to make meaning of our shared journeys and experiences. Space made sacred by the words and music woven together to form a whole greater than the sum of its parts. Space made sacred by the interconnection and interdependence of our lives. Space made sacred by the love and care we offer one another. As we enter into this sacred space, let us bring our full selves with all that we bring to the table. And let us also be present. Let us be present to each other. Let us be present to the feelings that we're having without letting them overwhelm us or dominate our experience. Let us be present to the sharing and reflection that is about to take place. Let us be present and open to what may happen as we spend this next hour together. Come, let us worship together.
Warmed and watered by the heavens, earth has set its harvest table before us. We light our chalice in gratitude and gather in thanksgiving.
For all that is alive, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for house of rest and love, for love and thanks. For all that is alive. For sorrow we must bear, for failure's pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we bound with praise and thanks. For all that is alive. For all that is alive, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
The Whole World Inside Nan's Soup by Hunter Ligor, illustrated by Vicky Zhang. Seeds, said Nani when I asked her what was inside the big metal pot she was stirring on the stove. It was the same one handed down from her Nani. It smelled so good, I couldn't wait to taste it. Seeds? I asked. How can seeds be inside the pot? Seeds that grew up to be vegetables, Nani said, smiling. There are also gardeners in the pot. Gardeners, Nani? How could gardeners be inside the pot? Gardeners, with their gentle hands, planted the seeds that grew up to be vegetables and ended up inside the pot. Nani winked. Soil and rain are also in the pot. Soil and rain, Nani? Yes, see them here. Nani nodded, stirring. In order for the seeds to grow, they would need to be placed in the soil by the gardeners with their gentle hands, and then watered by the rain before they grew up to be vegetables and into the pot for soup. I stood on my tiptoes to see. We also have the sun, the moon, and the stars inside the pot. The sun, the moon, and the stars, Nani, I asked. How could they possibly be inside the pot? Without the sun, the moon, and the stars, the seeds that were planted in the soil by the gardeners with their gentle hands and then watered by the rain wouldn't grow. So, they are in the pot too. Nani put her ear to the pot. Listen, do you hear that? It sounds like a honeybee, I said, listening. That's right. The bees pollinate the flowers. They grow up to be vegetables, planted by the gardeners with their gentle hands. So, they are in the pot too. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Can I see what else is in the pot, Nani? Oh yes, there is plenty more. Nani's eyes widened as she stirred the soup. Like the farm workers who pick the vegetables with care. They're smiling as they watch over the fields under the warm sun. They make footprints in the rich soil, carrying boxes full of vegetables to the delivery trucks, boats, and trains. And then what, Nan? There are delivery drivers eager to take the vegetables from the farm to the market. Nani smiled. I also see the merchants who greet the trucks, boats, and trains. They work in teams to bring the baskets of farm vegetables to the market. People gather curiously to see what they've brought. Oh, I guess that's everything, Nani. Nani looked again. I see a bus. A bus, Nan? How can there be a bus inside the pot? Not just a bus, but also the bus driver and all the people who join me on the way to the market and home again. Nani, are there roads in the pot? You bet there are. Nani's eyes grew bigger. Roads and highways, plus traffic lights, bridges, and waterways in all the neighborhoods we passed on the way to the market. And don't forget the electricity that keeps the lights on and the town running. Wow, Nan, I can't believe that's all inside the pot. Anything else? Nani thought some more, smiling bigger than before. What, Nani? What else did you see inside the pot? Love. Love is inside the pot, Nani? That's right. The love of my own Nan, who taught the recipe to my mother, who then taught it to me. One special recipe, passed down from generation to generation, beginning with the first Nani, just so I could make the soup and share it with you. Will you teach me the recipe, Nani? Nani said, You'll have to remember everything that's inside the pot. But I already do. Nani looked at me. What's inside the pot? The whole world.
At this harvest time of year in New England, we are surrounded by beauty and beloved traditions. The shadow side of these traditions is that many of their central stories revise, minimize, or outright erase or lie about the violence done by the so-called heroes of those stories to the indigenous peoples of this region. Because we want to support the ongoing telling of the truth about America's founding and its present, we invite your offering this morning to Indigenous Peoples Day Massachusetts, an organization dedicated to correcting the record of history and in renaming what is now Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day all across the Commonwealth. You can read more about them at indigenouspeoplesdayma.org. The morning offering is most gratefully received. Please watch your screens and check the chat for details on how to donate online, by check, and by text. Please join me in prayer. Gracious God, Creator Spirit, Source of all, bless these our offerings to worthy use. Bless this, our community, in our shared vision for a world made more just, in our yearning to be communities of healing and hope, where together we resist the temptation toward empty consumerism, getting and spending, wasting, and missing out on the true presence that makes so many moments holy. Incline our hearts and souls towards reverence as we renew our ties of faith and fellowship. For the bounty of the earth, the air, the sky and the sea, and the richness of life to which we are called, we give thanks. Amen.
Reverend Elizabeth and I would like to invite you now to join us in an antiphonal reading. Please remain muted and simply choose which one of us you'd like to read with. I'll begin and then Elizabeth will follow with the italicized words. Once more, the fields have ripened to harvest, and the fruitful earth has fulfilled the promise of spring.
The work of those whose labor has been rewarded. They have sown and reaped, planted and gathered.
How rich and beautiful is the bounty gathered, the golden grain and clustered corn, the grapes of purple and green,
The crimson apples and yellow pears, and all the colors of orchard and garden, vineyard and field.
Season follows after season, after winter the spring, after summer the harvest-laden autumn.
From bud to blossom, from flower to fruit, from seed to bud again, the beauty of earth unfolds.
From the harvest of the soil, we are given occasion to garner a harvest of the heart and mind.
A harvest of resolve to be careful stewards of all life's gifts and opportunities.
A harvest of reverence for the wondrous power and life at work in things that grow and in the soul.
A harvest of gratitude for every good which we enjoy, and of fellowship for all who are sustained by the earth's beauty.
Good morning, everybody. So I have a question for you. Who knows what's the best way to stuff a turkey? We'll serve them lots of pizza and ice cream. The tradition is on Thanksgiving, the community gathers, reflects on the year and thanks God for all that has sustained them, the bounty of the year. As I reflected on the bounty for this season, I was struck by how much I, and I guess we, have learned about bounty during the pandemic. Hoarding TP and groceries. We looked at the number of vaccines available versus the number of people trying to get a shot on the mass website. One day I remember they released 300,000 slots, and yet I didn't get one. The bounty of time the lockdown provided to many, allowing us the chance to rethink their lives and sometimes leaving our jobs. The bounty of vaccines in this country, while other countries still had none. The bounty of research that allowed us to be able to create vaccines, antivirals, and now wonder pills. Truthfully, I myself have always been a bit of a food hoarder. My kids swear that I was responsible for feeding an army in a past life. And then about 10 years ago, I got food allergies and I really started hoarding Oh, I can actually eat this cracker. So I'm going to go out and buy a case right now, quick, before they change the recipe or go out of stock. So I can only imagine, you can only imagine how much in the early days of the pandemic were filled with stockpiling special foods in my life. And truthfully, I never starved. In fact, like most of us, I gained weight. Now, how's that for bounty? Prior to the pandemic, when we thought of bounty, we thought of having rich, delicious foods, of a wonderful closet full of clothing, the richness of friends and family gathered near, huge Thanksgiving dinners with turkey and all the extras. Speaking of turkey, do you know why you can't take a turkey to church? Because they use foul language. I know, it's a groaner. During the pandemic, our thoughts turned to those who were stuck working out in the community as first responders and essential workers, and how many people in our country must work hard to survive and have no choices. Some of the veneer that makes us think that we are sort of all middle class pulled away, that life in these United States was ample and okay for everyone, revealing a truth that was much harsher. My giving turned much more toward hunger. And last Thanksgiving, this gathered assembly even gave to help quell hunger. It is not that I was unaware of hunger before. I want to tell you the story of Emma and the turkeys. Years ago, when I lived in a kind of boarding house during seminary, the lady who owned the place hired a woman named Emma to help her with her elderly mother. Emma was a big, sturdy African-American woman from the deep South, and she and I got along and liked to chat. And it was around Thanksgiving time when we got to talking about just how much food Americans waste with a holiday meal. Emma smiled, and she shared a bit of bounty wisdom with me. She said, you know, people just put their turkeys in a big plastic bag, tie it up, and throw it away. It's still just full of meat. They can't be bothered. Me, I go around and I pull them out of the trash and I pull off the meat and freeze it. And I can eat for months on what they throw away. And it's clean too. You know, it's all tied up in plastic bags. She smiled in pure joy at her resourcefulness and her bounty. I loved Emma's simple joy. And I hope that during this pandemic, we've learned a bit more of Emma's spirit, simple joys, bounty where it is least expected. A recent Christian Science Monitor article on inflation explains that whether or not inflation occurs depends in large part on whether the consumers and the business owners anticipate inflation. If we believe in inflation will happen, then in all likelihood, it actually will. It's because we will change our spending practices and our pricing practices if we're running a business. So what does this have to do with plentitude? Well, the TP crisis taught us that we had to think about whether it was bountiful to be the one with the secret stash of TP hiding in their closets, or the one with the TP giveaway booth on your front lawn. Just like our soup story, our view of things shifts how they actually are in the world. We can just have a pot of soup, or we can have the whole world in a pot of soup. And the pandemic has helped us with our understanding of supply chains to see that whole world a little bit more brightly. Success As Winston Churchill famously said, success is moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. The pandemic has offered us a great bounty of invitations to do just that, to become successful in being resilient, to find gratitude in small things, to be creative in trying new things, and to laugh at our first attempts when they weren't all we had hoped. From pandemic haircuts to loaves of bread to funny worship moments on Zoom. This pandemic has been horrible in many ways, but it has offered us a spiritual opportunity to re-examine what exactly bounty means. To seek with all our hearts and wisdom for those blessings that are there, even when they aren't what we are accustomed to looking for. We have so much gratitude for those who have helped keep our communities together, especially the tech people and the musicians and the RE teachers, and those who have kept their cool and pointed out what is going right and just how we will get through this. Because the most important thing in our religious communities is that we love each other. We have a bounty of love. Jan Richardson, in her book Circle of Grace, tells us that within the struggle, joy, pain, and delight that attend our life, there is an invisible circle of grace that enfolds and encompasses us in every moment. Blessings help us to perceive this circle of grace, to find our place of belonging within it, and to receive the strength the circle holds for us. For me, as I reflect on the bounty of the year, I find much to be thankful for. And my heartfelt wish for you is that you too remember how much we love each other, and that you find surprise turkeys like Emma in whatever your needs are, be it friendship, less stress, a good job, a roof over your head, or actual food. I hope that we all can count our blessings and feel the plenitude, the bounty in this season. Amen.
How do we know when enough is enough? How can we tell if our appetite is satisfied or sated? I don't know about you, but my sense of satisfaction or enoughness was broken long ago. For much of my life, I would repeatedly pass through the state of enough and move to being sated or overly full, be it with food, responsibilities, even self-improvement. It seemed no matter how much I tried, it was never enough. This is still something that I struggle with, although it's getting better all the time. And being here with everyone today and just seeing your faces and knowing what we represent and who we are together, it is enough. Enough is as good as a feast. One of my favorite quotes, introduced to me by one of my parishioners, Meryl Maleska Wilbur. I find the Old English saying provocative. It always makes me stop and think. Its pithiness demonstrates the truth of its message. Enough is as good as a feast. I must acknowledge that my reflection this morning is written for those of us who have the privilege and the burden of being able to overconsume. Many in life are not, and I recognize that. For those of us who can overconsume, and I can speak only from that place, the question is, when is enough enough? It is a challenging one, and I believe a critical question. When does more become not enough, but destructive? When does more become not enough, but destructive? In the simplest of terms, we know we've had enough when we're able to appreciate what it is that we are doing or consuming or experiencing, and to appreciate and be present to the company of our companions. Eating enough food, for example, leaves our bellies feeling warm, secure. We smile and maybe can even salivate when we remember what we just finished eating. Enjoying enough company with others brings about a sense of belonging, connection, stimulation, or comfort. We finish the time together different than when we started, having met our social or emotional or intellectual needs. Enough, when it comes to something like web surfing, gives us the information that we need to write a paper or make a decision. We may finish our research more curious or assured or even confused. However it is, when we're finished, we actually remember what it was that we were researching when we started. On the other hand, more than enough food leaves us feeling physically uncomfortable, often regretful, and sometimes even shameful. How did I do it again? It was only going to be one bite. When we've had more than enough company, we might stop listening, start to check out, be there in our body, but not in our minds or hearts. We may become insensitive in our interactions. When we have exceeded a healthy amount of screen time, we can become disoriented, disconnected, and drained. I find that living in accordance with this principle of enough allows me to experience genuine gratitude, connection, and yes, even bliss. Those things don't happen for me when I overindulge in anything. Lest I am making this sound easy, I reassure you it's not, at least in my experience. For many, if not most of us, this process of enough, consuming enough, doing enough, whether it's physical, mental, or social consumption, is something we have to learn to do I dare say it is a spiritual practice. Unless, of course, we've been so fortunate to have been taught otherwise, which would mean we were parented perfectly and that we lived unaffected by the prevailing culture that is around us, a culture that promotes more than enough through marketing, portion sizes, and addictive technology. The value of moderation or enoughness is an ancient truth. 2 of the 3 inscriptions on a column before the Temple of Delphi read, "Know thyself and nothing in excess." Why then is it so difficult to live this way? Well, there are many answers to that. I'll offer just one example of each of the physical, mental, and spiritual reasons as I see them. Physically, it is hard and challenging for many of us to stay in our bodies. We've learned to dissociate, distract ourselves, or intellectualize every time we get too close to a feeling, especially if it's challenging. Mentally, many of us have bought into this lie that more is better. Sadly, this lie can also carry over into our spiritual lives. William Blake knew this, I believe, when he wrote, "To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of our hand and eternity in an hour." Can you remember when you experienced eternity in a moment? Maybe it was as recent as this morning. Perhaps it was long ago. The Encyclopedia Britannica were my entry into eternity that years later the World Wide Web often steals from me. Picture, if you will, 45 years ago, I was 10 years old, wearing braids in class. I raised my hand. It was a history class. And I asked a question I don't actually even remember exactly. My teacher's response was predictable. She said, "I don't know. Why don't you find out?" They were the exact words I needed to gain a hall pass to be able to go to the library, where answers lay hidden on the bookshelves. My saddle shoes made a certain clumpy sound as I skipped across the linoleum floors to the library. I pulled up a stool to the stacks, stood on my tippy toes, and held my breath in anticipation. The heavy volume nearly dropped into my loving embrace, from where I carried it over to the long wooden table in the library and opened it with a gasp. The pictures, the words, the worlds, eternity. And sooner or later, an answer to the question that I had asked, whatever it was. I still remember the sense of devastation that I felt some 15 years later when the World Wide Web came onto the scene. Somehow I knew it ran the risk of robbing me of the chance to meet eternity in my quest for truth, found when I put my hands on the edges of books, the scent of their pages, the words, and the images that opened up the world. More was not better. True to that inkling, I still must be very careful about how quickly and frequently I turn to look online for answers and for what duration. The information I find there is often suspicious in its source, can be distracting if not overwhelming, and has yet to invite me into eternity. How then do we master this skill of, or spiritual practice of, taking in enough? I think first, it's important to acknowledge and remember that what is enough differs for you and me. For example, I cannot consume sugar. I need to severely limit my television and media input. And I find more than one party on any one day too much. On the other hand, the 2 hours of spiritual practice that I spend every morning would be intolerable for anyone else in my family. Second, consuming enough needs to be something we do consciously and intentionally and consistently, even as it is imperfectly, and to allow ourselves a time when we do overindulge and enjoy every moment. It does begin in our mind. Sociologist and author Brene Brown says, for me, and I quote her words, for me, the opposite of scarcity is not abundance, it's enough. I am enough, she writes. My kids are enough. My wish for you this Thanksgiving is that you take the time to experience enough and to find that feast, whether it's looking at one flower, taking a long walk with nothing else to do, or having a simple conversation with a neighbor, or even the family member who gets under your skin. May you experience the miracle of eternity that comes with enough and nothing more. Amen, and blessed be.
At this table, everyone is welcome. At this table, everyone is seen. At this table, everybody matters. No one falls between. At this table, you can say whatever. At this table, you can speak your mind. At this table, everything's forgiven. There's enough for everyone. So come as you are. Remember that the door is always open. Yes, come as you are. The perfect gift that you can bring is your heart. So come as you are. At this table, there will be no judgment. At this table, mercy has a seat. At this table, we are all one family. There's a place I'd rather be. So come as you are. Remember that the door is always open. Come as you are. The perfect gift that you can bring is your heart. Come as you are. Come as you are. At this table, everyone is welcome. At this table, everybody cares. At this table, everybody matters. So come, pull up a chair. Come, pull up a chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
At this table, everyone is welcome. We offer today this unison affirmation. for the doctrine of reconciling love, entrusted to us by our ancestors, for the sacramental search for truth, to liberate both mind and spirit, for the blessing of the call to serve, caring for one another, healing what is broken, and helping what can be helped. We give thanks this day as one body. Though we may be separated by distance, love unites us. Though we may be bound by our failings, truth frees us. Though we may be afraid of the world's great pain, service demands that we act. May the ways of the holy be revealed to us, and may we explore them together. Blessed be.
Beloved friends, as we depart this sacred space, we remain grateful. Grateful for this time together. Grateful for the wisdom shared here this morning. Grateful for our gathered communities who bear witness and companion us as we navigate the joys and sorrows of life. Grateful for the bounty, the goodness, the love that lives in our lives and in the world that some call God, that some call love, that some call the individual and collective human spirit. For all of this, we are grateful. Go and be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.